5 years ago, my life took a dramatic turn when I discovered that my fiancée, Karen, was having an affair with my brother, Chris. This revelation came just a month before our long-awaited wedding. Karen and I had been together since we were in high school, and we had supported each other through college. Our engagement felt like the natural next step in our relationship, and I was excited to start our life together. However, shortly after we got engaged, everything changed. Chris told Karen that he had feelings for her, feelings he had kept to himself for a long time. He confessed this to her days after our engagement, saying he needed to let her know because she was about to marry me. It was then that Karen admitted she had also started to develop feelings for Chris. Apparently, they had been flirting behind my back during family gatherings, though Karen had not acted on those feelings until then. Just weeks before our wedding, Karen and Chris sat me down with my parents to share this shocking news. They both announced that they were planning to be together and that Karen could no longer marry me because she and Chris were having a baby together. The pain and disbelief I felt were overwhelming. I couldn't accept it at first, and I begged Karen to return home with me and end whatever was happening with Chris. However, my mother made it abundantly clear that this was not going to happen. She insisted that Chris and Karen were in love and that I had to accept this new reality. I was shocked to see my mother supporting their relationship instead of comforting me. While my dad seemed ashamed and tried to console me, my mother was more excited about the prospect of having a grandchild. Her focus on the baby overshadowed my feelings, and she urged me to keep my thoughts to myself. The situation escalated as Karen moved in with my family because her own parents disowned her for what she had done. We had to cancel our wedding, and my parents even took care of the costs, but instead of supporting me, they turned away. I felt completely abandoned. I chose to stop all contact with my family. For 5 years, I had no communication with them, although my father tried to reach out occasionally. I refused to speak to him, and for the most part, there was silence from their side after I cut ties. It was incredibly tough to process everything that happened. I had genuinely loved Karen, and losing her felt like losing a part of myself. I went through a lot of therapy to work through my emotions. Even today, while I am managing better, I can't say that I am completely over the heartbreak. During those years, I learned through relatives that Karen gave birth to a son with Chris. A paternity test confirmed that the child was indeed my brother's, not mine. They eventually got married and have been together ever since. My family seemed to move on without me, and I was left to figure out my own way in life after such a painful betrayal. I had always believed that everything was going smoothly for my family, particularly for my brother Chris and his partner Karen, until an unexpected phone call from my mother changed everything. About a week ago, I received a call from her that caught me completely off guard. My mother, who had always shown an intense favoritism toward Karen and Chris, almost to an unhealthy degree, seemed to be reaching out for a serious reason. When she followed up with an urgent email, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to return the call. When I picked up the phone, I was met with my mother in tears. The news she delivered was devastating and completely shook me. I learned that my brother had been involved in a terrible accident, one caused by a driver under the influence, and as a result of the horrific impact, he had slipped into a coma. My heart sank as I processed this information. It was even more shocking to realize that this devastating event had occurred just a week prior. Additionally, I found out that only 3 days after the accident, the doctors had indicated that his condition was critical. Initially, I had thought that my mother might be calling to ask me to visit Chris and provide support to the family during this tough time. I was prepared to step up and be there for them because regardless of our past issues, Chris's situation meant a lot to me. It was certainly a reasonable expectation for my mother to have had for me. However, the direction of the conversation took an unexpected turn. Rather than asking me to visit my brother, my mother expressed a different plea. She wanted me to be present for Karen and my nephew, which left me confused. As she continued, I felt increasingly bewildered. She indicated that with Chris now unable to be there, it was my duty to support Karen and her child in every possible way. My mother clarified that she wasn't just talking about financial support, she actually expected me to move in with them to take care of them. This request was shocking because she claimed that although she would have liked to take them in herself, her age made it challenging for her to manage everyone's needs. To my bewilderment, she expected me to make a decision at that very moment during our phone call. I lost my temper at that point. For the last 5 years, my mother had distanced herself from me, and now she was calling me out of the blue, expecting such a huge commitment. I understood that Karen and her son were in a precarious position and needed someone, but I felt that the responsibility should have fallen on their immediate family, not on me, a person she had previously betrayed without offering an apology. With firm resolve, I informed my mother that I wouldn't consider her request, suggesting she was foolish for even thinking I would agree. This sparked an argument on the phone. I felt my frustration bubbling over, and I realized I didn't want to waste any more time in a heated discussion that was only making my mood worse. So, I ended the call and blocked her number once again. Afterward, I tried to carry on with my day, but I couldn't shake the feeling of worry for Chris and Karen. I felt sympathy for their difficult situation, but I remained firm in my decision not to take my brother's place in their family. After all, Chris was still alive, albeit in a coma, and my mother's response felt exaggerated. Later that same day, feeling unsettled by everything that had just happened, I decided to reach out to my father. I thought he might offer a more balanced perspective since he usually held a more level-headed approach than my mother. The conversation was awkward, given that we hadn't spoken in 5 years, but after a bit of small talk, I eventually asked about Chris's condition. He confirmed that things were looking grim. Then I recounted my earlier conversation with my mother, hoping for a different angle on the situation. Instead, I received another shock when he agreed with her that it was reasonable of them to expect me to step in and support Karen and their child. This response surprised me deeply, as my dad had always been the more rational one in our family dynamics. My parents, and now even my brother, have been saying some really strange things. When I asked him directly if he truly meant what he'd said, he confirmed that he did indeed mean it. He pointed out that Karen and I have a complicated history, and despite everything, I am still part of the family. He believes that after 5 years, I should step up for them because I am family by blood. He also mentioned that my mother's expectations, though challenging, are not exactly unreasonable. This sudden shift in their expectations caught me off guard and left me feeling overwhelmed. Right now, I honestly don't know how to respond to all of this. For the past week, I have been intentionally avoiding conversations with any family members, even my other relatives. I worry that if I engage with them, someone might bring this situation up, forcing me to explain my choices. I also feel a sense of guilt because I'm not stepping up for my family when they likely need my support. Even if it's not financial help, I know they could use emotional support as well. It's a confusing time for me, and although I recognize that my mother's requests are quite odd and a bit unreasonable, I still feel bad about rejecting them outright. I haven't even found the courage to visit my brother in the hospital because the entire situation feels so uncomfortable. Additionally, I haven't spoken to any of my friends about this, as it feels too personal for me. They are aware of the previous issues I faced with my family since my wedding was called off, but this scenario feels more complicated and challenging than that. That's why I am posting my thoughts here, hoping to gain some objective perspectives. I realize that my friends or family will have their biases in this matter, and I need unbiased advice so I don't end up losing my mind over this. I find myself slipping back into a dark time in my life when I constantly thought about Karen and Chris after discovering her infidelity. Those were tough moments for me, and I've worked hard to recover from that mindset. I want to avoid going back to that place if I can. So, I am reaching out for help. I need to know if I'm wrong for choosing not to see my family and not stepping up after my brother's accident. In an update, I want to share that I have decided against visiting my family for now. Taking this time away feels necessary, as I didn't realize how much my anxiety had grown over the past week due to all the pressure from my parents. I've started taking my anti-anxiety medication again and am focusing on how to cope with everything. Many people have shown me love and support in the comments of my original post. Some have even reached out to me in private messages, reminding me that I'm not alone in this. I also talked to a few close friends about what I'm going through. I really don't think I can handle this all by myself, and they reassured me that I can reach out to them whenever I need to talk. They've told me that my choice to stay away from my family is the right one at this moment, as I need to prioritize my own well-being, even if my family is struggling. Chris and my other family members have always put themselves first, so I believe it's okay for me to do the same. Honestly, I don't feel like I need to support them emotionally right now. They have each other and can manage this situation on their own. In truth, I once felt entirely alone when my immediate family didn't support me after my wedding was called off and I found out about the betrayal. My parents chose to side with my brother, leaving me without any support. I had felt a deep sense of betrayal when I learned that I had been cheated on, not just by someone I cared about, but also by my own family. My parents, the two people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, turned their backs on me and chose my brother over me, even though he was clearly in the wrong. It was hard to accept that he was the one who should have faced the consequences, yet somehow, he remained a part of the family while I was pushed aside. But regardless of the pain from that experience, I am doing my best to leave it all behind. I understand that in order to genuinely move forward, I need to distance myself from them. I have made the difficult decision to block all of my family members once again and commit to having no contact with them. Although I feel sorrow for what has happened to my brother, I still wish for his recovery. Deep down, I am not the type of person who can wish ill on anyone, regardless of past actions. I hope everything will work out for him and my family, but I need to prioritize my own mental well-being now. I am seriously considering returning to therapy, as the harsh words and actions from my parents have taken a toll on me. It has become clear that I am not handling these feelings as well as I believed I could, and all the old emotions are bubbling back to the surface. For this reason, I have decided to focus solely on myself and my own mental health for the time being. In an update, I learned from relatives that my brother's health remains critical and shows no signs of improvement. He has been in the hospital for nearly 2 weeks, and it is evident that the situation has become dire for the entire family. I genuinely feel for them, yet I find myself in a position where I can do very little. While everyone else who knows my family has visited the hospital to see my brother at least once and offered their condolences for the terrible accident he suffered, I have not been able to do the same. It's not that I wouldn't have wanted to, but I was informed that my parents have been spreading falsehoods about me to those visiting. They have been telling everyone that they asked me to come and be there for the family, but I refused. Moreover, they have twisted my words, claiming that I said this was karma for how they treated me 5 years ago and that my brother deserved this. For the record, I never said anything like that. Some of my relatives reached out to confirm this information because it didn't align with my character. They know me to be a generally kind person, so when they asked me if it was true, I made it very clear that those statements were fabrications created by my parents to paint me as the villain. This behavior reflects the kind of people they are, and I was deeply disappointed to hear that they would go to such lengths to distort the truth about me, especially after they had already caused so much chaos in my life. I consider myself fortunate that my relatives sought out the truth, because if they had simply accepted my parents' story, I might have lost all connection with my family altogether. For the past 5 years, I had not spoken to my parents, but I have maintained a good relationship with the rest of my family, including my aunts, uncles, and cousins. I truly valued that support system, and it seems my parents could not stand my happiness and success without them, so they attempted to ruin those bonds as well. Their hatred for me is hard to comprehend. I have never done anything to deserve such treatment. My brother and I were never particularly close, and my parents have always shown favoritism towards him since our childhood. Their actions now feel excessive and unwarranted. In a separate update, I want to mention that just 2 days after my last post, my mother reached out to me again. Even though I had blocked them on all platforms, she found a way to bypass that barrier by coming to my house in person. When I arrived home from work, she was already there waiting for me. At that moment, I had no desire to speak with her. I was simply too tired and emotionally drained from everything that had happened. I was already feeling completely drained from a long day at work, and I almost made the choice to retreat into my car to avoid any further interaction. However, just as I was about to do that, she noticed me and instantly approached. I had no intention of inviting her into my house because I knew that once she was inside, it would be hard to make her leave. Instead, I resolved to speak with her right there in the front yard, which ended up being a poor decision on my part. The conversation quickly escalated, and she began shouting at me, drawing the attention of our neighbors. At first, our discussion was quite ordinary. She started with some small talk, and I felt obligated to respond politely, even though my patience was wearing thin. Eventually, I couldn't hold back my thoughts any longer. I confronted her about why she had been spreading false information about me, painting me in a negative light. I expressed that it was unfair because I had never wished for any harm to come to my family, despite how they had treated me. I just wanted to move on with my life, but they were making it exceedingly difficult for me. These emotions had been bottled up for far too long, and the moment I saw her, everything just spilled out. I finally admitted that, after everything that had transpired, it was hard for me to consider them a family. They had never treated me as one of their own, and I felt deeply disappointed by their actions. I told her that whatever reason she had for coming over to talk could wait, as I had just returned from work and was not in the mood for any kind of conflict or deep conversation. Up to that point, she had been listening to me reasonably, but when I told her I needed some space, her demeanor shifted dramatically. She became angry, insisting that she was there to apologize for the very things I had just mentioned. She explained that both she and my father had been upset at my initial reaction to my brother's accident. They didn't understand why I hadn't visited him in the hospital, and they felt betrayed because I hadn't defended the family in that moment. However, she also admitted that they began to realize their behavior toward me over the past 5 years had not been right, and they could tell I was hurt by it. She believed that at this time, the family should come together for emotional stability. But after I expressed my desire not to engage with her, she lost her temper and began to yell at me instead. She brought up the fact that I should be grateful to still have a family, claiming that my reaction to my brother's accident was not emotional enough. She expressed that my indifference during that phone call had hurt her deeply. I couldn't quite grasp her reasoning, so she went on to explain that she expected me to display more emotion when I heard of my brother's situation. She said that, when I received the news, I seemed almost detached on the phone, and she was disappointed by my lack of visible feelings. Even though our relationship was strained, I was genuinely affected by the news, as I would be by anything that involved my family, regardless of our issues with each other. I had no intention of wishing harm upon anyone, including my family. I was upset when I learned about my brother's accident, but perhaps my emotions didn't come through clearly in that phone conversation. She could not see my face, which might have made my feelings seem less intense to her. Her reasoning felt completely unfounded and irrational. She continued to argue that my absence for Karen and my nephew, and my failure to step in for my brother, showed how little I cared about family. It felt as if she was fabricating reasons to justify their behavior toward me. I truly believed my parents had started to lose sight of the reality of our situation, and it was frustrating to engage in a conversation where the truth became distorted by defensive arguments. I truly believe that my parents have started to lose their minds because of the strange and unnecessary behaviors they have been displaying. It all escalated one day when my mother began to yell at me for no apparent reason. Her outburst completely drained any remaining interest I had in communicating with her. Frustrated and overwhelmed, I chose to retreat into my house and asked her to leave. After a little while, I finally unlocked the door to my home and stepped inside, all while she continued to shout at me from outside. As she attempted to follow me into the house, I quickly shut the door in her face, firmly telling her to go away. I was genuinely angry and had no desire to engage with her anymore. She responded by arguing with me, but I made it clear that I would call the police if she did not leave. That threat seemed to get through to her, as she finally decided to leave, but not without cursing me and warning me that I would face consequences for my actions in the near future. To be honest, I have no idea what she meant by that, and I am not interested in finding out. All I want is some peace and a chance to move on with my life. In my latest update, I want to share some positive news after a difficult 26 days since my brother's accident. My family has finally received some good news, although I learned about it from my cousins rather than directly from my parents. The encouraging news is that my brother is showing signs of improvement, he is no longer in a coma and is responding better to treatment. This is a significant relief, and I genuinely hope that he continues to improve from this point onward. The past month has been incredibly stressful for my entire family, myself included, even though I have felt somewhat removed from them for quite some time. During these 26 days, my parents have exhibited behaviors that show just how unhinged they really are. After my last interaction with my mother, where she yelled at me, I did not hear from her for a few days. Then out of the blue, my father called me using a different phone number he usually does not use, catching me completely off guard. As soon as I answered, he immediately started yelling at me, not giving me a chance to hang up before I realized it was him. His tactic was clear, he wanted to catch me off guard, and he succeeded. He called me at 5 in the morning, a time when I was sound asleep, ensuring that my mind was still foggy when I picked up the phone. After a few attempts to reach me, I finally answered his fourth call. Without any hesitation, he began to unleash a barrage of insults, telling me how ungrateful I was and expressing his regret that I had ever been born. He threatened to make sure that the rest of the family would stop talking to me because, in his eyes, I was a terrible person for not visiting my brother in the hospital during such a hard time for the family. His rant went on for nearly 5 minutes before he hung up, leaving me to process everything he had just said. By the time I started to gather my thoughts, he had already blocked my number. Although the incident was painful at the moment, I can now see the humor in it. My parents seem so desperate to portray me as the bad guy that they are willing to go to great lengths to accuse me of arbitrary things. I truly believe they were simply taking their frustrations out on me, needing someone to blame. I have always been there for the family when needed, but it seems like my father is determined to turn everyone against me. Fortunately, my relatives understand the situation and know that I am not at fault. They remember the events from 5 years ago and are aware of my side of the story. As my brother's health continues to improve, I remain hopeful that my parents will ease up on their unreasonable behavior and start focusing on supporting him instead of targeting me. I sincerely wish that those people would stop bothering me and instead concentrate on him. It feels strange to return to this space after almost 3 years away. So much has changed during that time, and most of it has been for the better. I now reside in Germany because of my job. I have been living here for a year and a half, and I have also begun a new romantic relationship. My girlfriend and I have been together for 8 wonderful months, and it has truly been a blissful experience. Throughout these 3 years, I have had no contact with my family, and honestly, that has been blissful too. I have maintained communication with some relatives who treat me well, which is a different situation altogether. As for my brother, He has made a full recovery after the accident and is doing fine now. It took him a while to return to his normal self, but he is okay today. Karen reached out to me after my brother improved to talk and apologize for everything that occurred in the past. I made it clear to her that, at this point, an apology was no longer necessary. Karen came to see me after people found out I was moving to Germany for work. She brought a bouquet of flowers as a peace offering, which was meant to represent both her and my brother. My brother did not come with her because he felt too ashamed about what happened 8 years ago. However, all of that feels irrelevant now. I told them I had forgiven them and truly did not care about the past anymore. That was a sincere statement. I have moved forward with my life and embraced better things. Since arriving in Germany, my parents have stopped communicating with me, and I feel quite happy about that. I would not allow those past issues to resurface under any circumstances. I am finally at peace and feel content. Now that you are all updated on my life, I need to get back to living it. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who showed me kindness and concern when I was active here. Thank you to those who continued to check on me in the comments, even after I stopped posting.